Welcome to Operation Exchange. This episode is intended for a mature audience. We will discuss sensitive subjects like child molestation, sexual abuse, so viewer discretion is advised. Today we have Kristy Johnson. She has a documentary on Amazon Prime. It's called No Crime and Sin. Me and Courtney sat down and watched it a couple of days ago. We have the opportunity to have Miss Kristy Johnson in on the podcast today. She'll tell us her story. April is Child Abuse Awareness Month, so hopefully we'll gain some insights on signs to look for and hear a story as well. So, Miss Kristy Johnson, would you like to tell them about yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people want to know like how our documentary came about. And then I can go back a little bit into our story, but it's kind of a miracle, how sometimes the universe lines up just perfectly and things kind of fall into place. And that's when you kind of know you're on the right path. And we were, my siblings and I were taking care of our mother who was on hospice care. And during that time, about 3 days before she died, she kind of had a deathbed confession. And she started it out by telling me like, hey, Kristy, I know you're going to be really upset, but I need to tell you some stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. So anyway, she just started telling me about how she was aware of, when we were really little, that our dad had been sexually assaulting us kids. And that, she had gone to the church at the time and had told our bishop of what was going on. And his word to her was, do not report it to the police. We can't make the church look bad. And you need to go home and be a better wife and mother.
Oh, wow.
So he doesn't have to turn to his children, right, to get his needs met.
And was he a prominent member of the church? Like, did he have a prominent role at that time?
Yeah, he was. He was actually an educator. So he was an employee of the church. And then he became bigger and bigger because his teaching, like he started off teaching like high school kids for the church. It's called seminary. And then it moved on to, he taught at Brigham Young University teaching there in Utah. And so he was a professor there, had his own office. And so, yeah, he became very, like he gave talks all over, Southern California. And so people knew who he was. He had a lot of writings that the church published.
So that's why it would reflect on the church so much. It wasn't just a member. He was actively working for the church.
Yes. And so back then he wasn't as big as he was. So it was interesting that they wanted to still like not allow, the name to get out or the crime. So that was very interesting. My mom gave me those details. So I would have been 6 during that time period. When she went to the bishop, and she revealed also that my dad had walked in on him hurting, I'll say the word hurting in this context, my brand new newborn baby sister.
Oh, wow.
And so it was that bad. And so when she had told the bishop that, he knew all those details and still told her to not report it. So they were going to work with them, quote unquote. And then so my mom's telling me this right before she dies. And I got very angry, right? Because I'm like,
understandably.
Yeah. And I was like, how could you do that? I go, so Mom, did you like leave Dad? Did you take us kids? And this is rhetorical because I already know that she didn't. And she's like, no. And I said, why would you choose the church over as children, as kids? And she didn't have an answer. And I didn't realize I was yelling at her. And she goes, you promised you wouldn't yell. And so I had to I was with her in a wheelchair at that time, and I wheeled her back to her little apartment, and I called, I think, my brother, and I said, you need to come sit with her because I can't stand looking at her. And I said, I need some to get away from her. And so I went for a drive, and I'll tell you, talk about, I already had memories of telling and all that when we were little, but like for her to say it like that.
And know that she didn't
like
do
to
anything.
The extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How common do you think that is? I'm so sorry.
No, what was your question?
How common do you think it is that the mother will know about the abuse, but will
turn a blind eye pretty much?
Yeah, turn a blind eye to keep the family together, or whatever the reasoning might be.
Yeah, the thing that I know with the religion that I was raised in, which was Mormon, I know that there's a really strong pull to that the church leaders are more of an authority than even the police. So everything's kind of kept in house, and they prefer it that way. They let you know that that they don't want you to report it, that they're going to handle it under God's rule. And that's the only thing I could speak of as far as the religious part of it. But there's other religions that they encourage them not to report it as well. So I do think in general, I think sometimes moms become very, or the other parent, whoever the safety person's supposed to be, I think they just get very intimidated and can somehow in their mind live with it. And they don't want to lose. Because one of the things he told my mother was that bishop is, like, well, your husband's going to get fired. Like, where are you guys going to get food? Where are you going to live? Kind of scaring her a little bit.
Like there's not another option out there.
Yeah, like we couldn't find food anywhere. You know what I mean? Like it was just weird that he was scaring her. And so I think back then, being single with a lot of kids, and then the shame of a divorce probably played a part in it as well. But to the extent where you would allow this stuff to keep going on and having more babies with someone, at that point, when I was on that drive, I was coming to terms with all of that. Like I was thinking, how on earth, And so I just really, and it became a spiritual experience for me because I pulled over and I just had this huge prayer with God. And I just said, I can't do this, but I promised to take care of her, because she's nearing the end. And so I asked God if he could allow me to look at my mother as a human being and not my mother, so that I could take care of her till she passed. And so I went back to her apartment, and the moment I walked in the door and I saw her, I saw this feeble woman who had been through a tremendous amount in her life and was also a victim of my father. And I was just filled with like mercy for her and love. And so I was able to just take care of her and make her very comfortable, and told her I loved her and thanked her for what she did do for me, and was able to be there when she passed. And so it became like I was able to end my relationship with her on this like higher level of love and forgiveness, as opposed to hating her. And to me, that was like a miracle because I was open, to it. So not everybody can do that, but for me and my siblings, we worked that out with her, which led really to us reaching out to my father at that point. And my older brother, Kevin, was really the one who wanted to reach our father, and because he lived in another state and had been remarried. So we wrote him a letter and said, look, you got away with everything. We have some questions for you. Here's what we want to know. Basically, are you open to meeting with us? And our father said yes. And so we were very excited about that in a weird way. But we thought, okay, like we just buried our mom and maybe he's going to come clean and then we'll be able to, find some kind of closure for ourselves. So during that time when we were planning all that, I got in touch. I saw one of my friends on Facebook, Michelle Snow, and she was writing about how her dad had done stuff to her, and I had known her in third grade. So I reached out to her and said, hey, man, I totally relate to what you're going through. And she gave me the number for a place in Utah called Restore Our Humanity. And she said, call these people. They'll talk to you about what you've been through. So I did. And Mark Lawrence answered the phone that day. And he, actually found out who my father was and kind of like a little bit of our background, and reached out to a film company who was looking to do a documentary.
That's incredible.
Yeah, just the timing of it. So we were put in touch with him, the film company, and they wanted to know, like, how much evidence did we have and stuff like that. And so I had been collecting documents and for decades, records and all sorts of stuff. So that's how that kind of worked out. So then we told him, hey, so during this time period, when we're preparing to go see my father, our father is my older brother, Kevin, died out of nowhere. And he wasn't sick or anything. He just went into the emergency room because his hip was hurting. And they found out he had like some kind of infection. So while they were taking care of that, the infection spread and he died right there, like 4 days later. And so in order to, we kept the appointment that we were going to go see our dad. And that's why in the film, you'll see us holding our brother Kevin's picture because he was supposed to be with us that day.
Okay. And what, how old was your brother Kevin when he passed?
He was 53, I believe, 53 or 54.
I noticed the picture you guys were holding. He looked like a young man. I say a young man. I'm 42. So he looked like he was one of my peers. But I wasn't sure about that detail. But yeah, that's incredible that you found people that were willing to help get your story out there. Especially in a film production.
Yeah, and it was.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. What was great is the film company, when they found out we were going to be interviewed, or not be interviewed, when we were going to speak with our dad and meet with them, they were like, do you think we could film it? And we were like, oh yeah, we don't think he's going to be into that. But my brother Kim asked him, would you be willing to be on film? And he said, absolutely. So we were thinking, wow, we're going in with good intentions. We don't have a secret camera or recording. We're going in full on with a complete understanding of what we were going to talk about. And so that's what's featured basically in the film, kind of around that meeting. And so, yeah, and just kind of what happened afterwards. Because during the film, what they don't show a lot of is that my dad made some promises to us during that, is that he was going to help us because he felt pretty bad for what he did, and that he would help us financially because, we didn't do that well. And, he really did. He said he wanted to make restitution. And and he had never been arrested, right? He still was never arrested for what he did. He's still alive. In fact, he's had a surgery to stop the shaking. I don't know if you noticed that in the film.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did see him at a deposition online, and his no more shaking. His hair's fuller. He was wearing a bow tie and suspenders, and he's doing really well. And
now
he's still alive.
Prostate cancer, right?
Yeah, and that was, I guess, frozen or something. I guess they can do that now. And so he's actually thrived and is still alive today, and they still never have prosecuted him and probably never will.
That's weird.
Because the cops were called in.
Yeah, he wanted to make a confession. And so he did. And what was interesting, and you don't realize stuff till later, but we all filled out police reports again, like we had done in California years earlier. And my dad, why the police were there, they weren't writing anything down. And he was telling them all this stuff that he had done to us. And they just said, okay, and one of the cops pulled me outside and said, we got to leave. We can't arrest him. And I'm like, you can't? Like at first I was like, I was thinking, has it been too long? So then I was like, well, of course they can arrest him, and it was, so I just was trying to go with it.
Is it because it was like this, when the statute of limitations was lifted on that, it was a civil matter? Is that why they don't arrest?
Well, no, because it's actually a crime. So the civil part's completely different. But the crime part, from what my understanding is now, once that report, once that's first made in the state of Utah, and I think in other states as well, once you make that initial report, no matter how many years it's been, there's supposed to be a statute that starts the time limit of I think a year when they have until to prosecute them, which I know now that nobody told us back then. And so that, because there's a lot of people now that are still being arrested for things that they did back in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
And I'm thinking, how are they able to do that? And why is my dad still unscathed from all this?
Do you have any theories as to why he might be getting off with it and everybody else is, or some other people are actually going to jail?
It's been a question of mine. I do believe, and this sounds like it's going to be far-fetched, but that's okay, is my dad originally was in Army intelligence. So when my mom met him, he was in Army intelligence, and they had sent him back east to do some training, and then he had a post at Vancouver, Washington, at the barracks there, but he didn't live there. Like, him and my mom lived off the barracks. And then he would wear a suit. He wouldn't wear fatigues. So his role was very weird. And eventually it was just weird. Like, so we didn't talk about it much. Like, there's no record of him leaving the Army. It was just, we knew about it. We knew about his calling, or whatever they call it there. But then all of a sudden he became like an educator for the church while he's still earning his degrees, and he's teaching at Brigham Young University, not having all these degrees. And I'm thinking, now I look back and think, wow, so is the church part of this cover up? Obviously they were, but then, like, is someone else playing a role in this even now? Because what was interesting, and I know I'm going all over the place, but it kind of ties into when we made a police report in Westminster, California, in Orange County, California. Three of, my sisters and I went down to the police station and finally made reports. They were going to pick up my dad that night, and they called my mother in the middle of the night, which I found out the next morning because my mother told me this personally. The police called my mother after we made all the reports, and they said, "Ma'am, is your husband there?" And she's like, "What do you need?" And they said, "Well, there's been several reports of felonies, alleged felonies, and we need to come pick him up for questioning." And she's like, "Oh, no, our church is going to handle it."
And that was just
and
good
they
enough.
Were like, yeah, and they were like, "Ma'am, like, we need to pick him up. Is he there?" So my mother called the church leaders right then before the police came. And they actually ended up hiding my dad out. So my mother helped them.
Is the Mormon church more powerful than the law?
I'm going to say yes, because in our case, and I'll tell you what else, we went back later to get our copies of our reports. They could not find any reports.
Wow.
And so our reports were gone.
Well, then that should eliminate that original statute, because they can't find their reports.
Thank you. Wow. We may be onto something, right? And what was also wow, that's a good point. Wow. So another point is that, in the film, they talk about the social services came out, like CPS, and did a report. And there were a few of those that were done during the time we were kids. Because somebody saw something and told, right? Not us, but it was reported. So they did all these investigations, CPS. And so we even had, like, somebody high up in California call the social services, like, all their records in Sacramento, because they go back for years, decades, right? They don't toss those records. But our name was nowhere on there. They couldn't find our names. They couldn't find our father's name. So there was like a cleansing of everything to do with our family. And so I do believe that the church stepped in, probably on several occasions, and created like an interference. And I don't know if somebody else did as well, but for a man to have done that much harm, and, it wasn't just our family, that we found out later from another person that my dad also harmed them. That was outside of our
I was
family.
wondering that. I know in the video he stated that it was just his own children, but
no,
that seems very odd for someone that's capable of doing that to their own children to not be doing it to other people's.
Yeah, so for my brother to say, like, "Oh, just one day, for decades you're this pedophile, and all of a sudden you're not." So
Yeah, and the
we
children
found
coming in
out
and out of
later.
his house. That was
Yeah,
meh.
wasn't that? Yeah, the timing of that almost seems like the universe interrupted and kind of brought the kids in right when that question was being asked about the safety of the kids that were around, right?
Right.
So I just, for my sister to be able to face my dad, because she hadn't seen him since she was like maybe 13. So we're talking decades later, she got to finally confront him about her feelings. And then, like, what, a year and a half later, she died of brain cancer. And so that was caught on film, her confronting him. So there was a lot of miracles that kind of came out with that film.
If you take religion out of it, me and Courtney have discussed this several times, but like we've known about cases where people have been reported to the Department of
Children's
Services, where, there'd be a girl in the household that's getting molested by the brother, also maybe getting abused by the father. They can just move one county over and
it throws everything out of whack.
It seems like everything just goes away. And, I'm not trying to be soft on people who get arrested on drug charges, but like there's people that are serving 15, 16 years in prison for a quarter ounce of marijuana, which is now legal in most places. But
absolutely,
even if it wasn't, let's say it wasn't, like people are spending 15, 16 years over a certain amount of marijuana. I don't know what the actual weight is. I'm pretty sure it probably changes from one state line to the next. But, for trafficking drugs across state line, or something like that, or become a felony, there's people out there spending some really serious time, where it seems like this country takes child abuse so lightly. They barely punish anything, if they punish anything at all. Like it's like a slap on the wrist, if anything. Like
compared to other crimes that they like to dish out.
It's almost like the crime has to make a big stink in like national headlines in order for somebody to actually get punished for a child abuse case. And it's very strange to me. Like, why don't we, as a society as a whole, why don't we value our children more than that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And that's been what I advocate for, because it doesn't make any sense. And you look at our societal challenges and issues right now, you've got homelessness, you have people addicted to drugs, you have mental illness, you have all these things going on. And the more people that you talk to and you find out what their history is, and people that are in prison, because they're disgusted by child abusers that come into the prison, right?
Yeah.
Because they can probably relate. And that's the thing it's just this entire crime where nobody's doing anything about it. And you go back and you find out that all these people that are homeless or they're addicted to drugs or have mental illness, it started somewhere. And there's always an uncle, a dad, a teacher, somebody has hurt them sexually. And it messes and takes away their dignity. It rewires their brain. They have trust issues. They're trying to numb it, and that's why I think it's one of the root causes of all of our problems as a society, because you can trace it back. So shouldn't that be the crime that either has a death penalty on it or life in prison, like automatically?
Absolutely. I agree with 100%. And it's, it is very common, for child abuse to be a prevalent part of a lot of people's stories. It just strips you of your confidence. And I don't know, man, it's kind of sickening though. But then you find out that these elites, and I won't get into politics here, but these elites from different circles of our society, whether it be Hollywood or politics, are, like the Epstein files. Like they don't want to release the Epstein files. They don't want to release the Epstein files because I'm sure they got friends on that list. If they're not on the list themselves, where they'll be found guilty of partaking in the child sex trafficking rings. And it's weird. It's like the Puff Daddy stuff. And, there's just, it's almost like these people seem normal on the outside, but the elites, the people who make the laws their rich buddies have this
most demented.
Yeah, they have
society.
some sort of cross wiring in them that makes them attracted to kids or power or whatever it is. And I really don't understand that aspect. It may be the most confusing part about our structure of a civilization that that I personally deal with. Is like, why do we not punish people who abuse kids? I mean, like the sex trafficking with children has become way more popular than for a criminal organization than the sale of cocaine or heroin. You can only sell cocaine or heroin once, but you can sell a child several times, and it's disheartening, man.
It is, and it's the most evil, like crime. It's the most evil thing that you can do, and it causes the most horrendous damage to a human being, because that child literally will have challenges the rest of their life. You can get help. There's hope for you, but you will always carry a part of it that you will question yourself at every turn. You will make decisions that you would have never made had you never been touched or harmed. So this kind of crime is the one that they should punish the worst on. And if they made that automatic, I think you would see a completely different world in all cultures.
Yes.
But I do not know myself what is the drive to harm a child. I don't know if it's the where they're taking away a child's innocence, because you are never the same after that.
Right.
So it's robbing a human being of that.
And then you just, like you said it great. You said it's evil, but then you add a layer of Jesus on top of the law, and then people just become immune to it. What's the deal with that? And I'm not trying to badmouth Jesus here. What I'm saying is, like, these are the people that should be on the front lines to protect these children, because the law isn't. So if they're going to face evil nose to nose in the battlefield, they should be the ones that you could look to protect a child. But it seems like when you add that layer of religion on top of it,
it's just another layer of protection for the evil.
It's another layer of, yes, that's perfectly said, Courtney. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they'll find a way. They'll find a way to just cause a distraction and be like, oh, look over here, like they're trying to make it a religious issue, and we can't, interrupt church and state, or that's what they do to cause a distraction. But this problem literally would have, if you took away, like you said, all religion and just look at it straight out as a crime against nature and a crime against humanity, and just look at it from that point of view, it's still the worst crime, I think, that could ever be committed
100%
against another human being. Yeah. So, I'm all for more laws and stricter stuff, but you got to get somebody who's going to enforce them. And you look at CPS, I'm not a fan of CPS. I wish they would do away with CPS and just create these places within law enforcement that they do specialty training, and that you get these CPS people out of here. Because you're taking these little new graduates out of school, social workers, and sticking them in these emergency situations, and you're giving them limitations on what they can do, and they leave kids in horrendous situations. And they do it all the time. And they do all these unfounded cases, and it's disgusting. And when you have law enforcement that is buddies with church members or people in government, and that's their buddy, and they just can't believe you would do something like that, they don't mind, taking away a report here and there, or
evidence missing. Yeah,
and they create more victims, because if you don't contain this, people act like they can be changed and it can be stopped, but this is something that they really can't control, and that's why they need to be removed from society. And I'm saying that they deserve all the help they can get in jail. There's plenty of help there. There's chaplains. There's all sorts of help for them, and they deserve that as a human being, but away from society. Don't let kids be at risk.
Yeah, don't make it another sexual identity to just become a norm.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you take if religion isn't gonna, if the churches that have the power, that are obviously above the law, aren't going to protect the children, and the law's not going to protect the children, then who the hell
And
is?
the mothers aren't.
Yeah, I mean the mothers, they may be in situations where they can't, but like who do we depend on to be the face, or the sword and the shield for the children? It's like it seems like we don't have anything set up in this country.
Well, we definitely need more people to come forward. And I think, like, I was even thinking, like, gosh, can we teach kids, like, how to take down an adult? You know what I mean? Like, is there, like, you know what I mean? Like, self-defense.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, but you take a child who's still very innocent, and you can't teach them things like that to the point where they're going to destroy an adult or, like,
or
they'll go away for life.
Or teaching them that without taking away that innocence of having to explain why they may need it.
Yeah. Or they'll go away for life if they ever have to use it, because murder is something that we do have to.
Right.
So it's a very, very, very strange aspect of our law. I'll never understand it. And like, it just kind of disgusts me. I have read the Bible a couple of times. I used to be in church. The church closed down. It wasn't, like I had some sort of, awakening and left the church or anything, but I just haven't really found another church that really fit our style since then. And I gotta be honest, I haven't really been looking. But the thing is like, I don't know, man. I think I could just beat the dead horse on that. It's like, why are the churches protecting this stuff, man? This is like not
because
the message.
Churches are a business now, and whenever their names get thrown around because of this, it affects their money.
But I mean, they can't do anything from within. Like, I mean, is it like it's almost like they understand? Well, men are just gonna molest kids. That's part of life. That's not part of life. That's not normal. And we shouldn't be normalizing it, and we shouldn't just turn a blind eye to it because it's not normal. Like most of us.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you make a really great point. Is there are laws in place, and there's laws in place for clergy. So one of the things, I know out here in California, Senator Hill years ago was trying to get this clergy privilege, eradicated or whatever, where like if let's say a child molester comes into his pastor and he confesses, right? He was trying to say that that pastor should help the child molester go down to the police and make a report so that he can be processed through the justice system as part of his repentance. Because I think that's what churches should be all about. They shouldn't be about, if a rapist comes in and says, hey, I did this to this person, they're to say, like right now, the law says that a clergy person doesn't have to report that.
Yes.
Yeah, but a
However,
psychiatrist would have to. There's laws against what you can tell a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and if there's a high risk of adamant harm to another, or they're told of the crime, it is their responsibility to inform law enforcement. But the church isn't held to the same standard as a doctor.
Well, they should be. And in many cases, like if a victim goes into the church and tells the pastor or whatever, I'm a victim of this is what's happening, their first call by law has to be 911. They are automatically at that point mandated reporters. But what's happening is these kids are going in, or adults now are going in and saying, hey, this is what happened to me. And they still don't report it because they're saying we're not obligated to. But they're getting that all twisted.
Even if they caught them red-handed. Like, no, that's
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. But I guess that's what confuses me is like what I was getting at earlier. If you just take religion out of it, we know people that aren't in church. They're not prominent members of society. They've never held a job for more than 6 months, and they're pitiful excuses for human beings that molest and rape their own children. And you call Department of Children's Services, and nothing gets done. That family will move. They'll move 15 miles down the road to a different county, and then the whole process has to start over. And the state knows about it. Like this, sometimes they move back to the counties they were reported in the first time. Like you'll learn that these families like
They bounce.
They just jump around, and these people aren't being protected by a church. They're being protected by
they're
law.
just regular.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of strong laws in place, but I can't figure out why law enforcement does not do much, because then you find out that they do in some cases. They have great law enforcement. They have great DAs. It just depends a lot on the district attorneys. And then these judges who are, elected by people, they should be looking at their records, like how many times they're dismissing these cases, But if I can just say one more thing about the church that really bothers me, because churches, their whole thing is to save souls and to bring people to Christ, and I can appreciate that. So if a pedophile comes into you and reports that, if your whole thing for church is to help people repent, right? So why are we not helping them repent then? Because part of the repentance process is to make accountability, make a full confession, and make restitution. You can't do that unless you're processed through the criminal justice system. If you don't take a pedophile and what you do is cover it up, right? He's going to think it's no big deal. He's going to keep on doing it because there's no punishment. So if you allow these guys to go down and make a full confession to law enforcement, say they get processed, they go to jail, let that all happen as part of their repentance. So at one point they can come back to, full fellowship with God. So because that should be the whole thing about churches.
That's right.
But what they do is just the opposite. They don't help them repent. They help them cover it. And then in the end, the church looks bad anyway for covering it up.
Yeah.
And then they get sued. So what's the deal?
Yeah, like the Catholic Church has been doing that, dealing with it for years.
It's a running joke in the Catholic community, really. I mean, I'm sure they're not proud of it, but the priest and stuff like that, choir boys, it's so common that we're not even surprised when we hear about it anymore.
Right, and that's what's sick.
Yeah,
is like it's become so normal to hear about it, where before nobody was talking, but. Bringing our story out, like we had to make a decision, like, do we want to go public with this? And none of my siblings and I were ever hesitant because we knew it would help someone, and help other people come forward. And a lot of people have. And, it's best for victims to always be able to find somebody that they can talk to about it and to find the help that they need, because remaining silent creates more victims, and I never put the blame on victims because it's a personal decision on what, they can do, when we always hope that they'll come forward, but even when they come forward, if CPS is talking to them or a police officer and they take the reports and they even get confessions from the people doing it and there's no arrest made, what was the purpose in that?
And why would more people want to come forward when it's just going to be airing some of their worst moments?
Right, because
just
families,
for nothing to happen.
We find out, because families turn on family members. Why did you have to talk about it? Why did you need to bring that up? That happened 20 years ago. Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to ruin his life? And you're like, really? What about my life?
Yeah.
What about me having to go through all this? And so we can't control. Once we make a report, we can't control what other people do. We have no control over how it's received, what our family's going to do, how law enforcement, CPS. That's the sad part about this, is then people turn it around on us. But I'll tell you, from coming from this point of view myself, I would do it again and again and again, because I have found freedom. I have found that it's worth it. No matter what family members don't talk to you anymore, or what law enforcement hasn't done, or whatever, my dad's still being free to this day. My justice in my heart did not come from my dad never serving time. I found my freedom through forgiveness. And I know that's going to sound weird, but being able, like in the film, at the end, you see me hug my father.
You're telling me you love him.
Yeah, and I tell him I love him because at that very given moment, I was thanking him for the things he did do for me as a father that were good. But I was also taking my power back that day.
That's right.
So it's symbolically, it's okay, son. So symbolically, I was giving it back to him because I had carried it for years. And I'm sitting there in this living room with my siblings, part of them anyway. And we talked and we looked around. There was no evidence that we existed in my father's life. There were no family photos of us kids. You know, he had gone on and had a whole other life like we didn't exist. And I thought, I'm carrying this around for this many decades and he's having a great life. So when I hugged him, I literally gave that back to him. And there was a physical shift in me where I felt lighter and I found peace in letting him have that back and like forgiving him, which meant I put it back on him and I freed myself from carrying that around. And to me, that's what forgiveness is. When you truly understand that it releases you of that burden so
Absolutely.
that I don't have to carry it. And that's what it means. People don't understand that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very big of you. You know, there's a lot of symbolism there. You know, there'll be, you know, some people might be like, oh, how's she hugging him and telling him she loves him? But yeah, what you're doing is like exactly like
letting
you said,
him know he doesn't have that power anymore.
Yeah, you don't have any power over me anymore. Sometimes forgiveness is for you. Sometimes it's for the other person, but a lot of times it is for you personally.
And it could take a lifetime, if never at all. Like that's a personal one-on-one decision between you. That's your decision. That's your privilege to do that. If you ever do it, you know, but also in hugging my father, I was saying goodbye because I knew I would never see him again. I had buried my mother with that higher level of, you know, love and forgiveness. And in that moment, I was ending my relationship with my father on that level because I never wanted to ever be in contact with him again.
Now, this may be a harder question, but you brought up the fact that he wound up leaving and left your mother with you kids and started a whole new life. With that said, why do you think your mom didn't try to prosecute at that point? Because she didn't have anything else to lose. Like he was gone. The money was gone. You're going to have to find food for yourself. All the reasons that the church gave her to not do it, it had happened. So why do you think she didn't at that point?
That's been something that I've always tried to figure out with her because I had long talks with her, you know. The church, again, because she remained a member of the church all the way up into her death. And the hold that the church has on her, I think really messed with her mind. At one point, she had written a letter to the church, the prophet's office, you know, their prophet or president of the church, and said, I want my name removed from the records because I'm done. And the church, as soon as she did that, they sent a local leader to meet with my mother. And I warned her because I had already left the church. And you have to, I know this is going to sound weird, but when you leave the Mormon church, you have to legally do it. So I had to give my letter notarized. And then I had to send it off to the church to have my membership removed. And I had to warn them that they weren't able to contact me anymore. So they have a great control over your life. And so when my mom finally decided to do that, they sent a member or a leader out to meet with her. And after they met with her, she was very scared and moved out of state. And I didn't see her for several years till later. And she was still very active in the church and just kind of put everything aside. And she just couldn't walk away from it. And so she never remarried. And, you know, that was another thing. My dad, the things that he did to her throughout her life as well, it wasn't just that he harmed us. He physically harmed my mother and he mentally harmed her.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? And there were a couple times that she put a knife to herself, you know, and that happened when I was a little girl. And it also happened when I was a teenager. I stopped her from harming herself. And so I was begging her at that point to leave my dad because he was horrendous to her. And so mentally, it took a toll on her. But she kept reporting to the church. She did that several times. When he was at Brigham Young University, the president of the church, or the Brigham Young University at the time, is actually next in line to be the new prophet for the Mormon Church currently.
Wow.
So this guy, that's how powerful.
Almost sounds like a cult. No offense. I don't want to offend you.
No, it is. No, it's a cult. I left. It's definitely a cult. And when people learn about what they do and the control they have and how it began and their true history, you do find out it's a cult. I'm not afraid to say that. So this man knew, and instead of, him reporting it as well, he just transferred my dad out of the state and had him teach otherwise. Look, kind of like the Catholics, how they move people around.
Yeah.
And so that's what they kind of did with my dad. But my dad was harming me in the church buildings as well. He harmed me as a little girl in his church office at Brigham Young University. So they all knew, it's not like it was a secret, and when we've done lawsuits, the church's whole thing was, you had they called it a special relationship I had with my dad. Can you believe they did that? They're lawyers.
Special relationship, huh?
They said we have no control over the special relationship she had with her father. So even if it happened on campus, we have no control over our employees, not during their off time, but it was like, we can't control his relationship because it was a family member. If he had hurt another student that wasn't related to him, then we would be liable. But because that's his daughter and that's their special, and they kept saying that special relationship and talk about triggering
That would make
me.
you want to bomb it.
Yeah, and I was thinking,
burn a
you're
building
a woman.
down.
Yeah, so the church, when they came up again, like our lawsuit, they hired they have their own attorneys, but they are also hired the huge attorneys out here in California. So they had two law firms that were defending them against what we were trying to say. And they got very powerful during that time.
Which goes back to that whole money from the church that allows the power.
And billions of dollars. They are probably, I would say, very confidently, they have more money than the Catholic Church. They are very wealthy.
They have a deep-rooted history. Me and Courtney watched a show. I can't remember
American
what it was.
Primeval.
American Primeval. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not, but
yes,
it tells the history,
a truer history of the Mormons.
Yeah, and
well, you know what? Oh, go ahead.
No, you're fine, man.
I have a tendency to interrupt everybody.
Me too. That's because I like to talk. That's what makes us good at this stuff, ain't it?
And if I don't say it, I forget it.
You go ahead and say it.
Like, calm down, Mom. But what I was going to say is, here's another connection to our family with Brigham Young. So when the church first started, there was Joseph Smith, and then the next prophet was Brigham Young. So our family, because of all, they do all their genealogy. My great, let's say, grandfather was good friends with Brigham Young. He was one of his bodyguards. He also was part of the Danites, they called them, where they would protect the prophet. They would go off and they were helping bring the pioneers from Missouri over to Utah. So that's who my family heritage is. He's been written up in the Utah history books, my great whoever. And so there's that connection to the church. And then the thing that they show on American Primeval was actually what was called a Meadow Mountain Massacre that occurred in Utah, where that wagon train from California that was headed to California went through part of Utah with, all these children and women. And it was just a wagon load trying to get their animals, to eat the grass or whatever, and then rest for a little bit and then go on to California. And the Mormon prophet, Brigham Young, ordered that slaughter. And so there's proof of that. And it was really sad what they did. And they didn't show as much in that series as they should and put more of a name on it. But yeah, that's what that was all about. And they killed everyone that was like under the age of, or over the age of like 4, I think it was. They left the little children alive, and they gave those to the Mormons to take care of until family members came in to get them. But they killed everybody. And it was the Mormons that did it along with the Indians at the command of Brigham Young. And they only brought one to justice. His last name, I believe, was Lee. And they put him to death for that killing. But he had a journalist that spent the night in jail with him, getting his story before he was going to be put to death the next day. And he swore on his life that Brigham Young was the one who ordered that kill. And that slaughter.
He definitely wasn't playing around. He was a lot more serious than, like I've only like learned briefly about American history in this aspect. And, like you hear about things, but like it seemed like Brigham Young was a lot more serious than American history gave him credit for, or the history books. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. But the truth is out there, and it's more prevalent now. And that's why there's so many people leaving in droves, the Mormon church, because once they find out the truth about everything, they start leaving, and that's why I left. It wasn't because of anything. It was just because of the history and finding out about that slaughter and all sorts of stuff. So it's like a very shameful part of history. And but that was part of our family, not the slaughter itself, but our connection to Brigham Young. And so I don't know, maybe that's why the church protected my father as well.
It's a good possibility. It's weird, like just the operations of these things, but it's a great possibility. That might have been why he got protected. Yeah.
And to this day. So you just know, and my dad's very active in the church. I mean, he has people that look in on him. He's thrived. He's never gone without a meal. He just has always been protected. They're the ones who, when my mom divorced him, the church leaders are the ones who set him up with this student he had taught earlier. She was an older woman. She wasn't younger. But and they all went to their wedding, and it was kind of a big deal. Then they rebaptized my dad and gave him leadership again in Utah, and he spoke all over again as if nothing happened.
And his name is Dr. Melvin K. Johnson.
Yes, I can confirm that.
Okay. Still very active in the Mormon church. Courtney, you got a question, don't you?
Well, this is just some kind of for any listeners listening to this episode that may want to have some information to help when possible. But do you know of like some specific signs to look for when children are being sexually abused?
Yeah. And a lot of times it's from somebody in the family, but they say to look for like grooming, like if somebody is very fond of your child and buys them a lot of gifts or wants to spend time with them or kind of be a mentor for them. And what's sad is there's legitimate people that want to help kids, right?
Right.
But this is a lot of the grooming tactics that they use in trying to earn their trust. And then they say sometimes they'll start out with like wrestling them a little bit or accidentally hitting a private part and being like, oh, I'm so sorry, to try to see how the child would react,
Wow.
and kind of be like, oh, hey, sorry about that. Or if it makes the kid feel really ashamed, or if they tell their parents immediately, like, oh, yeah, he accidentally, they know that kid will talk, and so they have a lot of stuff where these guys have said, like, these are the things I look for. They look for single moms, that are working, that are kind of, they don't have a dad in their life. They look for that. So they look like for the family dynamics, like, is somebody going to do something? Or are they going to be ticked off when they find out? Or if they're going to be like, well, we just don't talk about that. Or he's old, just stay away from him, that kind of a thing. Well, we'll make sure he's never around, but in reality, they don't. And they just create more victims by keeping it silent, especially within family units. But those are kind of some of the things. Is these guys, they have a lot of tactics that they use. Kids are very vulnerable online now more than ever.
Absolutely.
Parents, like Roblox. I mean, all these things are coming out where there's all these like little places that they can go into, like on this game where they can create a city or a condo where they can go, live with somebody by themselves. And it's just this little storytelling kind of thing where they create characters, and these people pretending to be other kids or give themselves kids' names or whatever. They befriend them online, and then they even have them do stuff in Roblox that can be inappropriate. And then kids, that are getting older, like 11, 12, 13, who have cell phones, they end up saying, oh, hey, can you send me your number? And then they can pick up their location, through phone numbers and phones, and can show up and say, hey, I'm down the street. Let's hang out. Don't tell your mom. That's happened several times in the news where you find out that it's like, because parents are like, how would they know where we live? How did they know, and they find out that it's just this buddy kind of.
And if you ask the kid, did you give out your address? Have you told people where you live? And they could be telling the truth. They haven't, but they've given other information that can be used to find it.
Yeah, and they do it very tricky, so that everybody's unassuming, because people are starting to catch on to what they're doing. So they try to keep one step ahead, but then they create, like there's a new thing now. I don't know if you've seen it online, but they have this guy who sees a girl, let's say walking home from school, a kid, and he goes up to her, and they don't have the van anymore, the lost puppy or Candy, because they've caught on to that. So they have a guy say, hey, your mom told me to come pick you up. I'm sorry, you probably don't know me. And the kid's like, I don't know you. I'm not, and the guy's trying to get him into the car, not forcefully, just kind of like, hey, just come on. I know your mom. We'll call her once you're in the car. And then a lady drives up behind saying, hey, what's going on? What's going on with this? Do you know him? What's he doing? And the little girl's like, no, I don't know him. And she's like, well, come stand with me, And so all of a sudden the little girl's talking to her, the woman, and she's like, look, just sit in my car, I'll drive you home. Do you just live around the corner? And the little girl's like, yeah. And so all of a sudden the neighbor comes out, and he's like asking the little girl, do you know these two people? And she's like, no. And he's like, well, why are you getting in the car with her? And so he's telling the lady, I'm going to call the cops. And the lady's like, no. And then they find out in the end, these two people are working together.
Yeah, make one
the man and the women in the cars
seem likely to distrust, and then another one come to be the savior to gain that trust.
And they're doing it together.
Yeah.
I thought you were actually going to say that the neighbor hired them. Like
no, they were just the good neighbor thinking, what the H is going on here, right? And in reality, these two people are working together. So they're trying to get at the kids' emotions and their safety in the moment because they panic.
Yeah, and we tend as a society to focus on men as the predators. So using women as a little
Nurturers.
Saving grace, someone just concerned about you is probably a pretty good tactic. Because we don't put enough focus on the fact that women can be just as evil.
Yeah, that I know for a fact. There's a lot of women it's more coming out now about them. And it's unbelievable to me. I still don't get what happens to people in their lives what create this, that creates them to become a predator. Because I really don't think people are born like that. I don't think they're born into the world as predators. I can understand that people have mental illnesses and things like that, but I don't know. We asked our father point blank if he had ever been harmed in his life. We're like, are you a victim of this? Did it wake up stuff in you, in your mind? Like, what happened? And he's like, no one's ever touched me. And I'm thinking, I don't know. That didn't make sense to me. But I don't know why people turn to this. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
It seems so normal.
Right. Like just regular people that have, regular jobs that that might give the shirt off their back to their neighbor, or mow their yard if the lawnmower's broke down or whatever, and you just don't know, like exactly what's going on in somebody's head. It's almost demonic in a way. Like if you get back into the religion, it's like very twisted, personality type to not only want to, but be able to harm a child. I don't understand it. I never will.
Yeah, and people need to be very aware that they cannot really trust anyone. And I know that sounds really bad, but even like I would have the neighbor kids come over to your house instead of you letting your kids go over there. Because you don't know if someone's got a boyfriend, an uncle,
Right.
if the mom's weird, if they're going to be watching porn, if they're going to let their kids get onto these games and leave them there for several hours. Like, unless you're watching and very aware of what's going on with your own child, you go with them. I know we all need a break, right? But you've got to really be on guard and try to do everything you can, to not let them.
Yeah, and I think
with other
that's part of society now, where like when we were growing up, it was nothing to go roam the neighborhood all day.
Until the lights come on.
Yeah, and everybody had birthday parties, and parents just drop you off at the birthday parties, and it seems like the more internet based society has gotten, the more rampant this actually is, which is weird to say. And I'm not saying it's the internet that's making it more accessible. I think it's the internet has diluted our ability to pick up on those social cues that something's not right.
Well, we're desensitized to
Right.
a certain extent. Like, it's nothing to be scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or something like that and see a horrible, automobile wreck where somebody dies, and like that would have been shocking, like very, very shocking, like, 20 years ago. But the shock value is gone from that now, like, because you see it every day. Like, you can see somebody die, like perish, like take their last breath, get attacked by a lion, whatever, fall off a cliff, helicopter go down, watch it crash. Like, this type of stuff can be found online. You don't even have to look for it, because I've never put that in my search bar. I'll just be scrolling through, looking at videos, doom scrolling, just wasting time, because that's all it is. And I might see 4 or 5 people lose their life, and I don't get a smidgen of, oh man, anymore. Like, I'm more excited about seeing somebody find something that's rare. Like if they're, mushroom hunting and they find a lion's mane mushroom growing on a tree or something. It's like, oh wow, check that out. Like that will get more of a reaction out of me than seeing somebody pass away on video. That's bad.
Yeah, but no, you're absolutely right. It's like, with cell phones and everything being instant and having that constant access and all that stuff going on constantly, and then having like children who are still developing in their minds, right? And they may have a bad situation at home, and they're looking for help, or they're looking for some kind of friendships, or they're learning all this stuff that's just being thrown in their face, like YouTube Kids. They found that YouTube Kids is still, like, every now and then these videos can pop up out of nowhere. They're very inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I've seen
like,
some of that.
Yeah, and it awakens children who are vulnerable and don't know anything, and it awakens weird stuff, and they don't know how to like contain it or to make it like, is this real or is this just AI or something?
Right.
Like, they can't make that decision on their own.
And the more they see of it, the more, I'm sure the easier it is to process and figure out exactly what's going on. Then they go to school and talk to their friends about what they saw online, and they may get some explanation from their peers. And the more they see it, the more they understand. But they're still not ready for that information yet.
Right. And I think an aspect of it too is like when we were going out in the neighborhoods and we were going to these parties and stuff, it required actual social interaction between the parents. a lot of times.
Yeah.
Now kids don't get out as much. Parents don't interact with other parents, especially not face to face anymore. And so you've lost this connection of actually being able to read a person because you never see them in person. So when the rare occasions come up that your kid wants to go do something, very rarely do we know anything about this kid or their parents anymore.
There's no discerning factor. We've taken the human, aspect
Discernment out of it.
Yeah.
Because everything is just so socially isolated now.
Yeah. And a lot of times, and people and parents are so freaking tired and overwhelmed that they think, oh, I'll let him play his game. I'll get a little bit of rest, maybe watch some TV while he's just on this video game. And it looks like it's a kid game because it's cartoonish, right? Never knowing that the person who they're playing with is could be a pedophile, calling from another state or right down the street, or one of your neighbors.
Predator.
Who's a weirdo. And you have no idea. You just don't know. So parents need to be more aware because kids are you can teach them all you want to be strong and know what to look for. But keeping that communication with your child and being very aware of everything, and not giving them all this freedom for hours to just go wherever. You have to take some responsibility, for that, because kids, they can be strong and we can teach them self-defense, and we can do all that, but their adults are not looking out for children like they should be. And I'm talking about schools. I've seen principals, I've seen teachers that have allowed children to harm each other. They've seen bullying. They've not reported. They've allowed it. And we assume that parents or human beings are all as strong as we are, that we're not going to put up with that. But they do. And these things happen all the time.
Yeah. So are you part of any specific nonprofits that the listeners could maybe look up, maybe even become a part of to help with the child sexual abuse and trafficking? And
well, yeah, I appreciate that. I'm kind of like, I've worked with a lot of different places. I haven't really endorsed anyone because I've not tried out, that sounds weird. I've called for help, or I've had people call them to see if they can, get help. But I've never seen anybody like follow through like they should. So I've been very cautious about throwing my hat in, or my name in there to do that. However, I know that SNAP, which is, if I can remember, I just spoke at their conference out in Texas last year, but they're the ones who, they're going to be very mad at me for not remembering what the acronym stands for.
And did you say SNAP, like SNAP?
Yes. And it's has to do with, it started off with like the Catholic Church, and like the victims and survivors. So they work with lawmakers, and they're all over the nation. So they have headquarters. And so I have spoke at their conference last year. They flew me out there, and I've spoken different places for other places as well. I spoke out in Vegas, had a thing there on the Brave stage, which was really cool. But as far as, anyone, I haven't truly done that.
And just for clarification, when you were talking about SNAP started out with the Catholic Church, you weren't meaning they're a part of the Catholic Church. They started out with victims from the Catholic Church, right?
Thank you. Yes.
And SNAP.
And so they work with lawmakers, and it could be for all churches and all religions. And most of their speakers were, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. But SNAP officially stands for Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests.
Thank you.
No problem.
It's
snapnetwork.org.
Thank you. So they do a lot, and I appreciate them so much, and for the work that they do. But their lawmakers, the people that were speaking at that conference, have done a lot They were helping with the Boy Scouts of America lawsuit. They've been able to change some of the laws in different states to make them stronger. I don't know if you've ever heard of the documentary series called The Keepers, but that started off where they were investigating a Catholic school for girls and what happened there. And one of those victim survivors spoke at that conference, and she was one of the ones who helped change the laws for her state. But that's on Netflix. That is still on there. It got nominated for an Emmy.
We
But
will
it's
watch
called
it.
The
Yeah.
Keepers. Yeah, it's intriguing. And it's still going on today because they're still trying to figure out stuff. But Spotlight was a great movie as well. That won the Academy Award. That had to do with outing of not the Mormon Church, the Catholic Church. And so that was really good too. They've got organizations, but our film website is called, it's just nocrimeandsin.com. A lot of our media and our interviews throughout the years is on there. But I would really like, we were starting an organization under my sister's name to try to work with her, but we had some other things happen in the family. They were kind of tragic. So we've had a lot of things happen since our film. And after Kathy died, a lot of stuff happened in our family that was pretty harsh. You don't realize what you go through in life going forward. Because, people think there's all these happy endings. And there is, because I'm in a way better place than I ever would have been had I not told, but you go through life as a survivor and things happen and they're hard,
Yeah, absolutely. And we would urge everybody to get on Amazon Prime. If you have that service and watch No Crime and Sin, that's Miss it was Kathy and Kristy Johnson, which we're speaking with Kristy Johnson here,
And their brother Kim.
and their brother. Yep. And it's an excellent. It's very short. It's less than an hour, right? I think it was like 45 minutes,
yeah,
something like that. It won't take much of your time, and you'll probably learn a lot. So we urge everybody to watch that film. And
thank you.
Miss Kathy, I'm sorry, I'll about called you Miss Kathy, but Miss Kristy, do you have anything that you would like to end with? Would you like to put a message out there for anybody?
Yeah, I just want to encourage, people to know that, when they do find the courage, to tell their stories or to go to the police, I always encourage everyone to always make a police report, no matter how many years it's been, to always make a police report so you have it documented and keep that report with you.
That is great information.
Yeah, because it's your documented proof. And also to please be aware with your children, to look for signs, to look for bruising, to look for them acting out, for listening to even some of the words that they use, to never teach your kids to use nicknames for their private parts. They say that it's very important that you give them the right, words to call it. So just things like that that are really important, but to believe your children and to never shame them and to just support them, and then just really try to support laws coming out that call for, tougher law sentences for these criminals.
And, man, you might be interested in this, but like we had a case here in Tennessee and it was church involved too. But if you want to, if you're not familiar with it, look up the case of Grant and Gracie Solomon. That is there is a documentary somewhere. I
want to say it was on Netflix too.
It might be on Netflix, but that was a very sad story, and I mean, like the governor
of our state
was somehow protecting, the father. It's a weird case, and in a lot of ways it does seem to remind me of your specific case too. So like it might be a story that you can relate to.
Let me see if I can find the name of it.
Oh, she's
I'll try looking that up because I love learning more about other people's stories, and it really keeps me going. But people that this has happened to, because it happens more than, I mean, the examples and, everything that's coming out is it's happening to more people than we realize. But just know that this does not have to define who you are in life. You may struggle and there may be things that you go through because of what's happened, but there is hope. There is a life that you can have. You don't have to pretend it never happened. You just work right through it and you keep going forward through fear. You face it all and keep on moving because you deserve a life that you want as well. And I want to give that hope out to people.
I think that's a great message. That's a very great message, Miss Kristy. We very much appreciate that.
And just as far as the Grant and Gracie Solomon thing goes, I believe that was all on YouTube where we were watching that.
Okay.
There's not an official like Netflix documentary on it, but if you just Google Grant and Gracie Solomon, you'll find several videos of what happened with that.
Okay, perfect.
And Miss Kristy, we would very much like to thank you for coming in, or calling in rather, and having an interview with us today, and telling your story. And again, everybody, Amazon Prime, No Crime in Sin, and we'll try to link it. If we can't link it, we'll at least link her website, where everybody can have just maybe be able to click and have access to that show or that website. But
thank you, Billy and Courtney. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a great day.
All right. Thank you.